All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, where Mona is apparently, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us on another beautiful, beautiful day for our September 2020 Coffee and CEU event from the DBA SIG. Before we get to our main event, we just have a few housekeeping items. This event is being recorded and it's going to be uploaded into our DBA page after the event. If you're here for CEUs, please make sure to stay in the entire event. We're going to be monitoring the attendance throughout the presentation. After the presentation, you're going to get a short survey that's going to be sent to your email, so please make sure to fill that out. That's how you're going to be able to send, that's how we're going to be able to send you your CEU certificate for the 1 BACB Type 2 Learning CE. Since we're monitoring the attendance, if you can help us by just making sure your full name is displayed on Zoom so that we know who you are. If you're logging in through a phone, if you can go ahead and email us at disseminateaba@gmail.com with your phone number used, your full name and email, and I will send that through the chat just in case. And also just to limit background noise, if you could please help and mute yourself, it's gonna help everyone have the best experience possible. And lastly, our DBA fundraiser is still on. All proceeds go directly to our dissemination grant. So it would be really cool if you could support us and your fellow ABAers in the sharing of our wonderful science. You can also pick up some great stuff there. My favorite is my mug that I have for my morning coffee or tea. And you can also support a great cause at the same time. I will also be linking that in the chat. So if you can, please check it out. So I think that is enough housekeeping stuff. And so let's move on to why you're actually here. So I get seriously the cool honor of passing you on to Wesley J. Lowery from TeamABA. It's all yours. Uh-oh, did we lose Wes?
I think we did. I saw him leave earlier. He must have got disconnected.
Oh no, that's okay. If someone didn't pick up their coffee yet, go get it real quick. Get your, coffee and CEU. So we have the CEU, you need your coffee. Uh-oh, Wes, I was not prepared to do a CEU this morning. I hope he comes back. Oh, there he is. Whew. Saved. Hi, Wes.
Sorry about that. Zoom kicked me out, so I am a little worried now. Actually very worried because I don't want it to keep kicking me out.
That's okay. We're flexible.
Okay. Can you make me a presenter again or co-host?
You got it. Amber says, welcome back.
Thanks. Sorry about that. So I hope I don't continue to get kicked out. I'm not sure what's going on with that, so my apologies, everyone. However, the PowerPoint will be made available for everyone if this keeps becoming an issue, and we'll just kind of take it from there. Let me see. Are you ready for me to start?
Yep, it's all yours.
All right, sorry, I didn't know if you did the introduction already yet. All right, so thank you guys for joining. Sorry, now I'm running into more issues. Here we go, I'm gonna move this thing out the way. Thanks for joining. My name is Wesley. I'm a BCBA here at TeamABA LLC. We are specifically a sports training and development ABA agency where we provide one-on-one group training for athletes. We work with youth, high school players. We work with teens. We also have a couple of collegiate athletes as well that we train and work with. So very, very, very happy to be on this team and be a part of this team. We also try to provide professional development opportunities for BCBAs, but also supervisees or students who are collecting hours. And we have a full-on supervision practicum program right now. Right now it's a practicum program, but we're getting ready to start expanding and developing our own curriculum, moving into preparing these students who are looking to collect hours to be able to have them go through our curriculum and sit for the exam based on sports training, health and fitness type of activities, topics, and stuff like that, but still relating it back to the task list that the BCBA provides for those to be ready to sit for the exam. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Again, sorry for the technical issues a little bit ago. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, but we will make it work. So this presentation was helped developed and created by Colleen Suzio and Dr. Natalie Parks, and some of the other team members here at TeamABA LLC. So the title that we're going to just going to jump right into it, looking at the introductions and applications of sports behavior analysis. Just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a brief disclosure, if you guys are looking for any new fancy terms, any new sports behavior stuff, this is just not that presentation. What we're doing here is we're taking some of the foundations of behavior analysis, and we're applying them to sports training and development with a little bit of a twist on how we would normally approach behavior analysis with the more dominant industry, and that is early childhood intervention. So there's going to be a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of terms that you guys have seen and heard before, but it's going to be more of a different approach on how we can use some of these same principles, these same strategies to better help our athletes develop. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's just talk about a little bit of brief history. So sports psychologists have primarily been kind of the ones who started looking at athletic development and training back in the 60s, right? So some of these articles that was published, just a few of them, right? Looking at the reinforcement contingencies for swimming, looking at completing behavioral assessments and interventions within youth sports, systematic behavioral feedback, and then building behavioral momentum with collegiate athletes. So, and there's tons more research that's out there. I just kind of wanted to, just get the ball rolling. You guys know that this isn't a new thing. It's been around for a while. It just hasn't really been that dug deep into yet. Some of the other sports and other papers that have been published a little bit more recently, looking at football players, with some basketball stuff as well, more swimming, and then some gymnastics. So especially with gymnastics, right, everything is primarily technique, form. Got to have the proper strength based on, what type of moves you're using, whether it's your shoulders. A lot of it's going to be with your core and stuff like that. So a lot of those skills, they were looking at sort of improving through these type of studies. So let's jump right into it, right? What is sports behavior? It's pretty straightforward. It's anything a person does, right? We all know this. When we think about sports behaviors, does it pass the dead man's test? And we want to continue to talk about sports behavior in that way, because this sort of industry ties in a lot, and it ties very heavily with coaches, right? Personal trainers, physical trainers, right? Strength trainers, and so on. And so when they're given feedback, right, from the coach's perspective, they sometimes use the language of, I need more from you, right? You got to have the it factor, right? Increase your aggression, right? Like I need to see those things from you on the field or on the court. And so when you would meet with a coach or a trainer, they would kind of list those things as things that they want to see improvement on with their athletes. And so just like every other FBA that we run through, we have to then, ask those questions and then kind of dig deeper to figure out, okay, what does aggression actually look like, right? What do you mean that you want them to, take more of the initiative? And so then we started listing out those specific behaviors that we can actually see and measure. So once we've had the conversation with the coach, now it's time to figure out, okay, how do we identify these sports behaviors, right? So compared to non-athletic behaviors, sports behaviors are composed of multiple responses, right? Multiple responses that make up that one sports behavior. So just take, for example, the free throw. So a free throw is only a free throw when the athlete completes a series of responses that includes the athlete's lower body, upper body working in sequence to complete that target response. If any of that sequence is not completed or a step is missing, then it's not the same behavior. So it takes the full motion of your athlete to be able to complete that one sports behavior. And if one part of that is off, whether it's the elbow, the feet placement, right, all that stuff, it can be considered a whole different behavior, or how we would, normally, hopefully just for analysis, it would just be an incorrect response, and then we would try to shape that up and try to get that back on track. So let's look at an example. So we have one of my buddies who's shooting a free throw. And so down here, you see there was this whole range of motion, right, all the way down from his feet, bending his knees to where his hips were going. And there's a better video. Slow it down a little bit so that you can see some of these smaller movements with where his elbows being placed, where his offhand. So what I mean by offhand is his non-shooting hand. That's very important to include, where his shoulders are facing, where his toes are facing, right? All those things take into account for this one specific sports behavior that we need to sort of work on or increase. So we're slowing down a little bit. We have the bounce. We have him getting ready to bend his knees. See where his feet are pointing. His elbow is in. His offhand stays up high, and then he has that follow through right there. So let's just look at it one more time. So all of these small minor responses, right, account for what a free throw is. Now, if we were to look at a different skill, and a lot of, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with the jump shot versus free throw, but a lot of these skills that are within these two separate behaviors have a ton of overlap. So if you're looking at it, we see the same things here, right? We saw the knees bent, the elbow in, the follow through, the offhand at the same position, but the key difference for this one is we have that elevation off the ground. So these are two separate behaviors that we would be measuring here, right? But if we're not specific about how we're describing our behaviors of interest, and we're identifying these specific targets, then we can have our athletes working on free throws instead of jump shots, or jump shots instead of free throws. So a lot of these skills may overlap, but it's those small minor details that'll help separate those skills, but then also help navigate how to specifically train or increase certain skills or responses. So from here, we look at, okay, so we have our skill of interest. So now we need to determine, okay, how do we determine which skill that we need to target? So typically, right, our elite athletes, right, these are the best of the best, our NBA players, our NFL players, You know, maybe even some of the D1 players who are getting ready to go to the professional, right? These elite athletes perform these skills and these behaviors at such a fast pace. It's so quick that it's hard to identify most of the time, and that's what separates the elite players from the great players. So in those situations, it's very important, very, very important that we then need to start creating task analyses so that we can start looking at, okay, which behavior or which skill within that chain do we need to improve, right? Or which skill within that chain do we need to decrease, right? So looking at that previous example that we just saw, if his elbow was not in a proper spot, we can break the whole chain of responses down into a task analysis, identify where we need to make that correction, get that increase, and then start training and developing from there. So task analyses are very important in regards to how we want to identify which skill that we want to start training or improving with our athlete. So we'll get into talking about a little bit about the task analyses. So what are they? Pretty straightforward. We're all familiar with it, right? It's breaking down these complex skills into smaller teachable units. So taking that large amount of responses and just listing them out. Okay, first his feet need to be here, his knees need to do this, his elbow needs to be here, right? But then next we need to put them in sequential order. One thing that we started doing recently is working with personal trainers from one of our local gyms out here with trying to figure out how can we quantify and measure their NASM curriculum to allow their trainers to be more effective with being able to move them through their NASM curriculums, which will be a 4-part phase, right? So they have stability, endurance, hypertrophy, strength, and then max power. But when you're looking at how you would evaluate a person's squat, right? If you're talking about it from a personal trainer's perspective, they're always going to start with the base. When they're looking at the feet, they move up to the knees, and then they move up to the hips, and then they move up to the shoulders, and then where their arms is placed. So they typically have you squat with your arms in the air. So if they're using that sequential order to kind of help identify where their sort of muscle imbalances are, where you see some maybe joint issues coming in, or maybe where the lack of strength is with certain exercises within their assessment. They go through that sequential order, which is very similar to what we need to do. So if you're starting a free throw or starting a jump shot, right, we have to figure out where that starting point is, and that's sometimes with the base, and sometimes just with the hands, right? Make sure you're having your hands ready, getting into catching position. Next, the result of the completion of this chain is a terminal response. So, all of the steps within our task analysis have to have a terminal response. And then also another thing that it allows for marking those specific behaviors, and that's again following back on that task analysis and identifying which skill that we need to work on. So what skills can we use for these task analyses, right? So it's any skill that's made up of one or more basic skills. Pretty much all athletic performance can be used for, a task analysis can be used for. So we have a golf swing, a crossover within basketball, right? Tackling, a butterfly, stroke within swimming, and even down to a swing within baseball. So then we ask ourselves, right, how do we create these task analyses? Typically when let me put it like this, I guess a lot of us, right, we start off in the field of, early childhood, working with the special needs population. And then we would observe our client emit the behavior. We will, video, observe it, direct observation, whatever the case is, and then we'll start building from there and writing it. But then when we're talking about sports behavior, right, a lot of us as BCBAs, I'm not gonna say everyone, but there's a majority of individuals who may have played the sport growing up, maybe played a little bit of college, but not a lot of us go to the professionals, right, and come back and be BCBAs. There might be a few, but we have to take into account, we have to observe this skill, but most importantly, we have to observe a competent individual perform the skill. So if we're working with let's say a youth athlete, maybe in Pop Warner, 4th or 5th grade, and they're trying to, make it to freshman football, right? We need to observe how a freshman athlete would complete these skills, right? And then from freshman to varsity, from varsity to college, right? College to professional. So we have to have someone to perform this skill and model it in the correct way. Next, we need to consult with the content expert, right? Me, myself, I'm not a content expert when it comes to a lot of football stuff and just sports, and it's just like sports performance in general. However, I know how to measure, I know how to change behavior, I know how to increase, I know how to prompt, I know how to teach within a shorter time to accelerate the learning. However, if you ask me, what's the proper way to do a butterfly stroke within swimming, I mean, I could give you some ideas, but that's where it's very important for us as behavior analysts, right, to know our scope of practice, and then make sure that we're bringing in a content expert to be able to then model that skill, verify that we're able to measure this skill properly, and that we're performing it correctly. And then lastly, right, we can try it ourselves. Are the skills that we're trying to teach, if we do it, does it work? Are we able to fluently emit these skills that we have written down in our task analysis, so that we can start training and teaching our athletes or our learners? So it's very important that we have all of these three components involved when we're creating our task analyses, because, as I mentioned before, right, most of us, we need to make sure that we're staying within our scope of practice, and then we're bringing in that content expert to help get that validity of the skills that we're trying to teach and we're trying to improve. So when creating our task analyses, we, as I mentioned before, we want to interview content experts, do a little bit of research, maybe watch some other videos, maybe have some other coaches or other athletes perform the skill so that we can see how they do it, practice the skill, right? So we're demonstrating the skills for ourselves. And then after we go through all of that, we want to then start to write. So the first thing we want to do, just like any other time that we're writing a task analysis, we want to start with those major steps, right? Those major motor movements, depending on whatever skill it is. We want to list those steps in order and how they occur. And then from there, we want to continue to break each of those major skills down into more simple skills, right? So making sure that we're accounting for every movement, every sort of placement, whether it's the feet, the shoulders, how far do they, their knees go down, whatever the case is, right? We want to continue to break it down as much as we can so that we're accounting for every small detail within that skill. And then I guess I just repeated myself there, but continue breaking those larger skills down into smaller skills. One thing that separates, right, when we're looking at sports behavioral, looking at sports behaviors, is we have to account for those nuances, right, or slight differences across people when we're creating these task analyses. So I'm a basketball player. I'm using a lot of basketball references, so hopefully, you guys can kind of, hopefully majority of people are familiar with that. But when we're looking at completing a crossover, right? Crossover is just a dribble move that that you would use in basketball to help create the separation between yourself and the defender, so that either you can make a shot, make a pass, or dribble past your defender. So when we're talking about these slight nuances, right? These are very important. And it's different from how we would write a task analysis within early childhood, is because, if we're talking about aggression, right, hitting is hitting, right? You can just punch someone or slap someone or kick someone, and we can all count that as aggression. But if we're looking at sports behavior, we need to then, when we write our task analyses, not only just look at, right, the feet placement, the knees bending, where the elbow is, or the follow through. There's tons of other little behaviors that are occurring that may, right, separate those elite players from great players. And that's where we want to train. That's where we always want to train, right? We don't want to train just to be better. We want to train for them to be the absolute best, especially when it comes to sports, competing, and trying to help them improve in that aspect. But also then we have to ask ourselves, right, is this movement important, right? So for certain skills, we then have to ask ourselves, okay, is the way that he's looking, the way that she's, whatever the case is, right, is that going to be any effect on improving their skill? So that's where you got to kind of question yourself and then consult with those content experts to see, where is that line drawn? So we're going to look at a video, kind of breaking down, well, not breaking down, but kind of showing that small little detail within the crossover. So you can kind of see right here in the thumbnail, if you're writing a task analysis for a crossover, you may just only think, okay, switching the ball from one hand to the other, right? But if we're looking at the full sequence of the body motion, right, you see that a lot of the elite players, right, NBA players, they always drop this ankle right here whenever they're switching. Whenever they're the crossover move. So let's go ahead and watch this video right quick. So you see here, when he's from, no matter what side he switches from, that opposite ankle drops each time. So let's see if we can back it up just a little bit so we can see it again. Look at this, let's see it right here. Yep. There it is right there, right? Dropping that ankle. Oops, sorry. Boom, right there, right? Dropping that ankle. Same thing in here, right? So if you're not super familiar with basketball and dribble moves and stuff like that, dropping that ankle is essential with making a quick and effective crossover, because what that does is that already puts the dribbler in position to change directions. So that's essentially what we're doing. We're faking like we're going right, but in reality, we're going left. But if you don't drop that ankle, right, your change of direction speed is a lot slower. So those are the little things that we have to make sure that we're accounting for when we're measuring, writing out our task analyses, but then trying to improve to identify, right, where we want to go with our athletes. Sorry about that, guys. And this what kind of leads us to our kind of next bit is, we need to write our task analyses to be, to have that competitive edge, right? So we're not just writing just to say, did it occur or not? We're writing to, we're training and we're developing to say, is this the best? Is this going to separate our athlete from their opponents? Is it going to separate our athletes from their teammates, right? Because if our athletes come to us and they say, hey, I want to be team captain, right? I want to be a leader. I want to be able to, be an example. This is where a lot of competitive edge comes in to show, hey, yeah, you can do a crossover or you can do a proper, tackle, but is it the best one, right? And that's where we want to get into, training how to do the skill first. Then we need to train to excel with that skill, and then build from there, right? Train these complex skills to be competitive, right? So it's like I said before, it's not just about can you make a jump shot, but it's how quick can you get your shot off? Because when a defender's running at you, you got to be able to get that shot off just like that. So that's the level of training that we're putting into place for all of our athletes, and how we need to develop our task analyses after we identify our behavior of interest. Which leads us then into pinpointing. So once we've identified our task analyses, we broke it down and we found where our deficits are. Now it's time to then let's target what skill that we need to start improving or decreasing. So we're going to get to a little bit more about what pinpointing is and how to do that within sports behavior. So why? So first, it identifies the specific skill of interest, right? It allows for measurable and descriptive objective. It increases fidelity within data collection, excuse me. And finally, right, it helps monitor performance across skills for analysis. Excuse me, sorry. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with pinpointing, but we're going to talk a little bit more about what it is. So pinpointing is a process of determining and specifically describing a behavior, a skill, or a response. So when pinpointing, right, it includes a movement cycle. They're always created towards a terminal skill or a terminal response. It includes behavior pairs, which would be your correct response versus your incorrect responses, right? And the reason why that's important is because we can graph and chart our data and show that, yeah, there's an increase in the pinpoint that we're trying to target, but then if there's some of those incorrect responses, right, we want to make sure that those incorrect responses are going down to 0 or at least near 0. So we have to include both what we're looking for, but then also what we're not looking for. And then lastly, the context in where this skill is going to be performed or where they need to be performed. And we'll get into more about the context a couple of slides down. So I'm getting a little bit shorter of time, so I'm going to kind of speed up my pace just a little bit. So one of the guidelines for pinpointing, right, pretty straightforward, has to be measurable, has to be countable, right? Does it pass the dead man's test? Can you easily count what is target? So our ultimate goal is to write a pinpoint so that we can easily identify when one occurrence happens, right? Can you easily measure it to say, yep, that happened, opposed to maybe an operational definition where you have a class of responses, right? So if you say, hey, I want him or her to be more aggressive, and then you have, shooting more, passing more, whatever the case is. But it's at that point, if we're only taking data on aggression, it's hard to then say, okay, was that pass? Like, would that count as one? Well, he did, run faster. Does that count as one? He looks more aggressive, type of thing, right? So with the pinpoint, we're kind of clearing all that out, and we're just getting down to like the nitty gritty and looking at like what specific instance of behavior is occurring, and did it happen or did it not happen? Next one, we have to have a counting period. So it's a predetermined time frame or time period of observing the skill. Sure, like I said, a lot of you guys are familiar with this, right? We can do minute timings, 30-second timings, whatever we want to do. Preferably to be at the same time each day to account for just other variables that may be in effect. And this time period has to be long enough to be able to observe the skill to occur about 8 or 10 times. So if we're looking at shooting free throws, right, we can shoot free throws pretty quickly, right? If we have enough people, enough equipment, we can get shots up very quickly. But if we're looking at, full court, layups or, jump shots or whatever, that time period may be a little bit longer because it's going to take the athlete a little bit of time just to make it all the way up and down to perform that skill. So it's very important to have an appropriate period for our pinpoints. Next, we kind of touched on this already, right? We have our correct and incorrect pairs, right? So state what we want, state what we don't want. And then we have to also include a learning channel set. The majority of it will be, seeing, right? Are we able to see the skill being performed? But there may be other skills or athletes that require a different set of learning channel, and then we'll adjust those as those come. And lastly, right, it has to be a skill that is kind of hard to do, right? When we bring in our athletes, we always do a full-on FBA assessment, and then we also do a skills assessment based on their sport that they're playing. So we run them through our assessment, and then we determine, okay, yeah, this is where deficits are within this skill, and they're all categorized, across, shooting, dribbling, passing, whatever the case is. And then we also have a volleyball skill assessment where we look at serving, setting, digging, hitting, passing, right? And so when we're bringing our athletes, we always do that initial assessment, and it's recommended, whatever sport that you're playing, even if it's powerlifting, right? You always want to come up with an assessment to then determine where should you start within your sequence of training, so that then you can start developing your pinpoints. So back on track, sorry. So something that's hard to do, something needs to be improved, or that's within acquisition. And then right here, right, we're looking at the context, right? So every pinpoint should include a context within a process of pinpointing, right? So when to observe the skill, right? Where the skill will occur, right? So if we're looking at, taking back to a basketball example, a layup is a lot different than a half-court shot or a three-point shot, right? So if we say, hey, we need to have a shot with the elbow in and the follow through, but there's no context, then your data can be skewed if your athlete is shooting 2 feet away from the basket opposed to 15 feet away or 20 feet away from the basket. So we make sure that we're including that context in there. With whom the skill will occur. This will be more of measuring maybe some offense attacking, right? So if there's a defender on you, what type of move should you make? How many defenders are going to be on you, right? Will depend on what move then you should make, right? What object will receive the skill. So if we're shooting, we want to shoot towards the basket. We don't want to shoot towards our teammate. We only want to pass towards our teammate. When the skill is done correctly, and then lastly, when the skill is not done correctly. So these are important factors that we're including within our pinpoint to help us be more descriptive, to be more accurate, to be more precise within how we're going to track, measure, and then finally, right, determine how we want to increase or decrease these skills. And then lastly, right, as a coach or a trainer, right, selecting these appropriate skills is important for reaching some of our team or individual goals, right? These pinpoints should be individualized for each athlete to improve game time performance. Without these pinpoints, right, it's very difficult to measure progress with the skill. So as you notice, right, we went through all those guidelines within the context, right? We want to make sure that we're as specific as possible so that we can then determine, is he or she getting better, right? And then lastly, right, it allows for these basic fundamental skills to then build into more complex skills. So if we're only looking at the elbow, now we can look at the follow through. We can look at where the base is or whatever the case is. So real quick, we'll wrap up with some of the sports implications of using everything that kind of we just talked about, the pinpointing, task analyses, right, and then describing what these sports behaviors are. So with pinpointing, you typically see that within the standard acceleration chart, or we call that the SEC. And some of these different charts can be functional for across different type of performances, right? So we got our daily charts that can be used for daily practice. It can be used for game time performances, right? So if we're looking at an NBA team, they play, I think, 2 or 3 games per week. We can look at daily charts for that. If we're talking about football players, they play maybe once a week, right? Game time on Sundays, or college, right? Game days on Saturdays. We'll switch that to weekly charts for game time performance. Now, if you want to do monthly charts, right, that can be preseason data versus regular season data, looking at training camps, so on and so forth. And then we have our yearly charts, which could be overall season performance. And that could be combined with assessment performance. And this also could be very, very beneficial and useful for general managers or team owners, right? Or for those who are in the front office, handling ticket sales, marketing, so on and so forth. So for them to see, okay, how did we do across the last 10 years without having to put a ton of data points on daily charts. We can just look at our yearly charts to then determine, okay, there's been a trend across this decade or whatever the case is, right? So there's tons of different options that we can use. And these are just some initial ideas. But I think it's a good way to then really dig deep and analyze athletic performance across the different chart options that we have within a sales acceleration. So just like every other BCBA, we like to see graphs. So let's get into some of the data. The graphs I'm getting ready to present now are all professional athletes that I've backdated to kind of show what their performance would look like on the chart, the different ways to look at their performances on the chart. We're not going to get you're not going to get super detailed into, the accelerations, the level, all those small minor details, but I just wanted to just provide some examples of what some of these charts would look like. So for this athlete right here is Kawhi Leonard, 2018-2019 NBA season, where we're looking at field goal percentages. So these are jump shots that he made opposed to ones that he missed. So for this chart, this first chart, we're looking at his bounce. So you can see, and it's kind of hard to see, but we have two lines right here at the bottom, looking at where the level of his bounce is for the, no, I'm sorry, they're not the two. It's not in between these lines, sorry. It is this bottom line and one of these top lines, and then this top bottom line with one of these top lines up here. But for the sake of time, right, we can go and look at our charts, get a closer look, manipulate to see the bounce for the corrects versus incorrects, and really tease it out to really get a good adequate analysis on here. But like I said, it's just for example purposes only. So we can look at the bounce of his performance. We can look at his level of performance, right? So if we're looking at the pluses and minuses, sorry, our dots and our X's, we see that he's pretty leveled out throughout the whole season. This is all just for, like I said, just the 2018-2019 season. So this is a good example of using a daily chart for athletic performance for an NBA player. Next, we have a football player, Russell Wilson. He's a quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. And I graphed his 2017, 2018, and then 18 and 19 season, to where we have, it's a little more easier to identify the bounce in this one. But then we can see his performance across seasons using his weekly count per week chart. And then you can see his performance across seasons. So it's not, we're putting, if we look at our traditional X versus Y chart, it'll be very difficult to kind of get these same type of visuals if we want to look across seasons or be able to make predictions for the next season as well. So you have his weekly count right here for his bounce, and then we have his weekly for the level of performance for his dots and his X's. Next, we have, and I don't know if a lot of us are familiar with Anthony Joshua, but he's a boxer out of the UK. And what makes this chart pretty cool is that boxers usually, when they're first starting to fight, they usually fight maybe once a month or once every couple of months. So for this one, right, this is a perfect example for him. We can look at punches landed versus punches missed. And we can see, again, right here, right, we have the bounce. And then for our timestamp, this would be how many rounds the fight lasted. So if we're doing some, deep analysis, we're looking at it, we see, okay, in 2 rounds, he was able to get around 60 punches, and he probably missed about 30 something, right? Maybe like 37, 38 punches, right? And then we get to a fight where he had a lot more rounds, his punches go up, right? But then at the same time, right, all of this is standardized. We're able to then do our best analysis to then determine, okay, where do we need to intervene with his skills and his responses or his punches. So we have the bounce. Again, right here we have the levels to show kind of where he's predicted to go based on how many rounds he's fighting per match. And then lastly, right, this is for the front office or general managers, right? This data could be very, very, very important because we have the yearly per year count for coach performance. So for Rick Edelman, between the years of 1989 and 2014, he's an NBA coach, and this was his total season average of wins versus losses for that year. And we could see, right, like I said, this for the bounce, it's kind of hard, but if we, looking at our chart, we can make it bigger to kind of look more of a detail. But this is information that we can use to then make some of these more precise and deeper analyses to kind of look at his performance as a coach across years, right? This is over 20 something years. Sorry, I thought I had the level in there too. But just really really taking a deeper look or taking a different look of how we could measure, intervene, but then also, right, provide this type of data for some of those, corporate, directors or those big decision makers, right, determining, is this coach going to stick around for another season? Is he doing well? Is he projected to do better this next season, or is he still on this downward slope and we need to start thinking about hiring someone else? Huge implications in regards to saving those teams money, keeping under the salary cap, right? Looking at different contracts for athletes to show, like, hey, your performance hasn't been the best over the last couple of seasons. We have data to show you're projecting to not perform as well this season. Or from an athlete's perspective, right, they can bring their graphs or their data or whatever the case, right, to the front office or to the team, and they say, hey, I feel like I'm worth more than what you guys are paying me, and here's the data to show that. So there's tons of different ways, tons of different things that we can get into with these type of analyses by using the chart and pinpointing these specific behaviors or skills, right, based on our task analysis that we created and we developed. So just to kind of summarize it up, I know I'm running low on time, and sorry if I went kind of fast, but these sports behaviors that we're looking at are composed of multiple responses, right, that make up the one sports behavior. And so we have to take all that into account so that when we are trying to intervene, we're intervening on the appropriate target or that one specific action, that isolated movement, so that the whole chain of responses come together to improve that skill. Identify which skill to target, right, is crucial for elite performance and elite training. Right, writing out these task analysis help us determine what skill to train to help meet that competitive edge. And then lastly, right, these pinpoints and creating these pinpoints allows for more precise training to improve skills. And then lastly, we saw with the charts, right, help us monitor progress and help make those predictions. And references, and that is all I have for today. So thanks everyone for joining. Our social media, TeamABA LLC, we're on everything, Facebook, Instagram. We have about a team of, I want to say 7 or 8 BCBAs we're training volleyball, we have soccer, we have basketball, we have football, we have a nutritionist on staff, we have personal trainers, And each of us, we have our own social media accounts. If you're looking for more questions specifically about a certain sport, again, our website is TeamABA LLC. Just get more general information about sports behavior analysis. We have our BCBA supervision program, which is at TeamABA University, where you can start collecting hours, get some experience if you want to kind of dig deeper into kind of doing this on your own, or maybe joining up with us. Have any questions, you want more information, you just want to reach out to us. Contact information right there, info@TeamABA LLC, or training@teamaballc.com. And that is all that I have for today. So thanks everyone for joining and listening in.
Yeah, that was great, Wes. All the comments are saying how cool this presentation was. Everyone is super excited. Rachel just had one quick question. She was wondering
Sure.
if we could go back to the list of references real quick.
Sure. Was there anyone specifically that you're looking for? So I can send. I have them all listed somewhere else as well. I can send them out if you guys looking for articles, looking for a specific article.
This is Rachel. Yeah, thanks for going back. I wanted to look at that. I'm a college professor, and I have a number of D3 athletic coaches who are in our ABA program. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always looking for more sources for them to be able to draw further connections between their work as coaches and their pursuit of being behavior analysts.
Sure. I have a slew of articles that I can send over to you, because when we first started TeamABA about 2 years ago, a lot of the the first year is just what does this look like, and so just like every other scientist or researcher, right, we have to then figure out what's been done before, how well did that work. So we spent a lot of time prepping to help build our infrastructure, our model, but also the way that we intervene. So if you want, I can provide my email. You can just send me a quick email saying, hey, shoot me the articles, and I have no problem sharing that information with you. So let me know if you want that or when you're ready to write it down. Or I can type it into the chat. That might be easier. Can I type into the chat? Oh, I don't know. Oh, here we go. Yes.
And I'll also link his email in the survey that comes out at the end as well, just in case.
Is there any other questions?
Going once, going twice. All right.
Yeah, I actually have one. Sorry about that. Would you be able to briefly discuss how you conduct your FBAs and skill assessments?
Yeah, so within TeamABA, we created our FBA assessments where it's pretty straightforward on your typical FBA assessments, right? We're getting the demographics of the client. We need to know what sport they play, how long they've been playing, if they have any injuries, right? We want to make sure that we're able to train and make sure that we're not in a position where we're going to re-injure anyone, if they have any medications, or have any other diagnoses. And then from there, right, we're going to identify, okay, what are some of your strengths? What are some of your weaknesses? And then what are some of your goals? What are some achievements that you've received most recently? And then depending on the athlete, right, if they are minors, we'll meet with the athlete, ask them those same questions along with the parent, and kind of help them match up and line up. If they're neither minor, college athlete, or whatever the case is, or professionals, we'll just run them through that kind of brief FBA just to get some general information. So nothing too far from how we would normally conduct our FBAs. But then for our skills assessment, we've created similar to how you would do like a VB Maps. where we have, I was describing earlier, we would select our 4 to 5 major categories of the skill for that sport. So for, let's just say basketball, I'm more familiar with that one, right? We'll have our shooting one, dribbling, passing, and defending. And then from there, right, we will then connect with the content expert, right? So for our curriculum, we had a retired professional athlete or basketball player who both played in the States but also overseas, to kind of help us determine, okay, which skills are going to be more important, which skills should build on these skills, and then getting all that information from that point, from our side, from the behavior side. Then we put that together in, okay, how do we measure it? How can we best how can we run these drills to yield the best information? How do we best graph this to yield the best data analysis, and so on and so forth? So there is a combination of both, the behavior side of what we're able to do, but then also bringing in one of those content experts to then help with the validity, and then bringing it all together so that we can make sure that we have a solid product.
Thank you for that.
That was a great question, by the way.
All right.
Anything else?
Looks like Shaylin, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. She says, you mentioned you cover gymnastics. Who is running those programs?
Who's running the gymnastics program? So we do have a gymnastics coach who's actually who just passed her BCBA exam. Prior to COVID, we started to get some inquiries for gymnasts out in the DC area. So we luckily found a master's student who was a gymnast coach, for us to then kind of help put together our skills assessment and start writing up our training itineraries to then to help us work with our gymnasts that we have out there in DC. But the person that I'm talking about, if you're looking for a specific name, her name is Kia Windsor. She's out in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I'm not sure if that was the answer that you was looking for. Hopefully it was. If not, let me know.
Yeah, sounds good. She says, yes, thank you. Perfect. So it is a minute past, so I do want to respect everyone's time and Wes's time as well. So, a big thank you to Wes for being here today on a Saturday morning and helping us out. If you do have any other questions for him, you can email him, of course, and you can also email us at disseminateaba@gmail.com. Just letting you know, you will get the survey hopefully within the next couple of days. It will have Wes's slides, it'll have the resources and any other things that were included in this presentation. Other than that, go enjoy the rest of your Saturday and Sunday and take care. See you guys next time.
Thank you guys so much for joining.